Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and we've got some more vintage Kenner Mint-On cards that have sold recently on eBay, a mix of buy it nows as well as auctions. Some early cards all the way through the Power of the Force line, some interesting sales. It just feels like, based on some of these sales, that prices are inching up just a little bit. And I've noticed that with a few different comic books that I've been watching, even with some PSA trading cards, which I'm kind of thinking about dipping my toe into. When you look at all the price charts, obviously there's a big, massive spike during COVID, and then it dropped like a rock, and now it feels like it's starting to inch back up again. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it just happens to be this time based on what I picked out. But let's take a closer look. We've got an AFA 75 12-back C3PO. That one sold for $9.50. We just talked about that Coruscant Collection seller that had a 12B C3PO. That was an AFA 80 that sold more. That obviously sold for more than this one, but this one feels about right for a 12C in a 75 grade. It wasn't perfect. Obviously, it had some heavy, moderate wear around the hang tab, and then some sticker residue in the upper left-hand corner, but overall, a very nice presenting example of a 12C. Here was a 75 plus grade large head Han Solo 12-back C. This was a punched example with a price sticker. 75, 85, 80 were the sub scores on that one. That one sold for $1,700, a pretty healthy number relative to the small head Han that we saw that was a 12A recently that sold obviously for more than that as well. But, you know, $1,500 to $1,700 would have been my guess on this one. It was maybe towards the upper end of where I was expecting something like that to sell. It was a buy it now. It wasn't an auction. Likewise, here was a R5D4, and this was a 21-back C AFA 75 that sold for $780. That feels right as well. You know, every time I looked for a 20-back, or excuse me, a 21-back R5 with that Secret Star Wars action figure offer in like 80 grade or above, it seemed like they consistently went more than I was willing to spend when I was actively trying to get some of these. And they were always going like $1,250, $1,400 or more for an 80 grade. And this was, again, a 75 grade archival case, 75, 70, 85. I think that 70 subscore was really why this one was priced where it was. It was priced really well. I'm not trying to disparage whoever bought this. I thought that was a very fair price, but I think if it had like a 75 or an 80 subscore, along with that 75 card score to bring the overall down to a 75, I think because of that 70, you need to be a little bit lower on the price point. But that was a very fair deal for what that was. That's a really nice example for the price. Obviously, this one was in rough shape. This was a 21-back A Boba Fett, but it was still sealed on card. It did have a crack in the blister, as noted in the auction description. But, you know, when are you going to get a 21-back for sub $2,000, even, you know, with a crack in the blister? I thought this was a perfect example of, if you're on a tighter budget, but you've been really dying to get like a 21-back Boba Fett, an early card back of Boba Fett, this is about as cheap as it's going to get, quite honestly. I mean, I thought that was a very fair deal. And again, it wasn't perfect. I can't really see the crack. It was noted in the auction description. They said it was starting to form, but it's just really tough to see where it is on here. It might be right there. I think that's on the back of the card. You can see there the crease going through on the back of the card in the yellow there. I don't think that's part of the crack, but you know, it's just really tough to say. But, you know, in all fairness to the seller, they did mention that it does have a crack forming in one corner. So anyway, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, to me, to get that one for $18.25, it's not something you need to grade or anything like that. You just put it in a sliding acrylic case. And again, I thought that was a great deal for what it was. Here was a 12-inch Boba Fett. Now, this one was a catalog order mail away because the flap had been folded over, similar to what happens with the Wampa. Sometimes you see that flap folded over, and then they have kind of like a, you know, this tape that goes over top. This was applied, I guess, either in the factory or by the store. I don't know, but it was graded by AFA as factory sealed, AFA 75. And that one sold for a big number at $5,000. You can see there, 12-inch series, 75 grade. It's a shame that the department stores do that for if it was not folded over and in 75 grade. To me, it would be better because you could see the figure, obviously. But that one, it did sell at $5,000. It's not for me. I mean, to me, you're just buying a box within a box. You can't even see the figure. But there are people that that like to have these 12-inch figures factory sealed. And if it was an AFA 80, where the flap wasn't folded over, it's going to be significantly more than that $5,000 number. But it's a 75 grade flap folded over. I still think in an auction it doesn't go that high personally. I don't think it hits that number, but that's just my guess. I can't really put that based on any kind of data points, but I should have probably looked up on Hakes to see if there's anything similar to this that has sold. But that one, it feels like it would be a little higher than what it would have gone for in an auction, just looking at that number. This was an interesting one. This was the dark brown haired Luke Skywalker AFA 80 on the 47 back. So you can see there, it's not like the lighter brown hair. This is the really true dark brown hair, which they do come on these ESB card backs and also on the 48 back Return of the Jedi free 9-num offer. So this one was a yellowed blister, but it was an AFA 80 unpunched with a Toys R Us price sticker, and that sold at $2,200. And I don't know, again, it probably would go for a little less in an auction, but not by too much. Those dark brown haired Lukes mint on card are routinely very, very pricey, even ungraded. So I don't know how far off it would really be even in an auction, but that's a very nice example. This is the first time we've seen one of those dark brown haired Lukes mint on card in a while on the channel. And here is that seller that thank you to Dominic. He reminded me, Gold Star Tech was the seller I was trying to remember. A lot of these items I feel like he bought from Gold Star Tech and now he's relisting them. But this seller has a bunch of really nice mint on cards that have been kind of a deluge on eBay at auction. And there's some real beauties, and they were kind enough to include videos for all of them so you could take a closer look at them. But this one is the 21 back Greedo unpunched, beautiful example, really, really clean. And here's the back of the card there. The lighting is a little off on that, like the exposure is too high. So, but looking at that blister, really, really nice. And the card looks nice. And this has got a good chance at an 85 grade. So that's why it sold for the price it did at $1,600. I mean, I've seen, Chris over at Rogue 5 Toys has sold very high grade examples of the Greedo, offerless, AFA 80s and 85s for well above this number. So that is just one figure on the 21 back that continues to be very, very pricey. So I think that number is pretty fair, really. They had some other early Star Wars card backs with the Cantina aliens. Here was the Walrus Man on a 20 back with the Boba Fett offer. That one sold for $792. He's always been a little bit cheaper, or a lot a bit cheaper than Greedo. But that was another clear blister that was in very good condition, I thought. Probably an 80 grade. And then they had Snaggletooth also on the 21 back, unpunched, no price sticker. I can't tell if there's something going on with the blister there on the left-hand side. It's tough to see there. Maybe it's starting to yellow, maybe just a little bit, but the rest of the blister itself looks clear to me. It's just in that one corner. It's part of the racetrack, I think. I don't think it's necessarily yellowing, I guess. It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. They've got a video for each of the items, and I was going to see if I could take a closer look. See, that looks clear there. When you're looking at the video of it, it looks clear. So I think it's great that this seller includes that information so you can kind of take a closer look at it. And that does help, I think, with the final prices. But $11.12 was the final sales price. Again, that was a very high grade example. Next up was a 32 back Han Solo Hoth clear blister. It looks like it had a little bit of issues on the blister there. Some kind of overheating, which did happen a lot with ESB card backs, where when the figures were getting sealed to the card, they applied too much heat and it caused that rippling effect. It's more noticeable on like 48 backs and things like, a little bit later card backs, but that's still factory sealed and a very clean example. But because of that overseal, it's, a slight issue there. But a very nice looking 32 back Han Solo Hoth, and it sold for a $511.79. Again, a very fair deal. Probably about a 75 plus grade would be my guess on that. And they had another Yoda. This was on the 41 back. Now, typically on the I think it was the 41 back was when they were transitioning over from the orange snake Yoda to the brown snake Yoda. And I feel like with most 41s, you don't see the orange snake Yoda. Maybe, I'm not an expert on Yodas by any means, but I just feel like usually on the 41s, you start to see the transition examples where the apple heads show up and the brown snake Yodas. But this one is the standard orange snake with the lighter green head. Slightly different color there than the rest of the body, as you can see there. It might even be a Cater gray head in there. I don't know. Usually the Cater gray heads were on the brown snakes, though, so it might just be, lighting or something. But interesting sale there, $535.25 on that one. And they had an Ugnaught. This one went for a lot of money. Usually Ugnaughts don't command much money. It's been my experience that people just don't care about the Ugnaught. But this was sold for $542. This was the 41 back D, I believe. And crystal clear blister on that one. Very, very clean, unpunched with the Venture price sticker. But $542 is a lot more than I would have expected, even in that 80 grade condition. And Bossk on the 45 back is a really tough one to find. It's almost impossible to find on a clear blister. Now, this one was definitely a reused photo from J. I can't remember. It's J something or other that sells all of these where the easel is used to hold the figure up. So I know he reused this because I remember this tear in the upper right-hand corner there by the hang tab. I mean, this was sold fairly recently. So I don't know what happened with this particular seller and why they decided to buy it and then a month later or 2 months later resell a lot of these. You can see that they reused a lot of the photos from Gold Star Tech and from this seller, J something or other, that sells all the time on eBay. So who knows? I mean, maybe the financial situation changed, but again, they included a video so you can see that it's the same item, but I just thought it was interesting that they reused a lot of the same photos. This is a good example of a Gold Star Tech. This was probably a Gold Star Tech purchase from this seller because that's how Gold Star Tech usually presents all of their items. And I guess they've finished up selling everything because there's not really anything lately from Gold Star Tech that I've seen. But this was a beautiful clear blister 65 back Obi-Wan. And this was the 65 back B. Very, very clean condition. That sold for $355. For an Obi-Wan clear blister like that, I thought that was pretty fair. It did have a little issue around the hang tab, but nothing major. Still an 80 grade, I would think. Very nice. And then they had the AT-AT driver. This was on a 65 back yellowed blister, unpunched. That sold for $255, probably in line with market there. Darth Vader with just a slightly yellowed blister. This was a 65 back, unpunched with a Mervin's price sticker. That one sold for $511. Man, that's what we talked about, right? Every Darth Vader, even with yellowed blisters, they tend to command a pretty decent number. And I've got another Darth Vader that sold here on an ESB card bag that I thought was a good deal as well, that we'll get to in a second. But that was a very clean example, and it doesn't matter if they're yellowed or not. If they're very slightly yellowed, Return of the Jedis, or clear blister, Return of the Jedis, they do command a big number. Two different Han Solos from this seller. First was a yellowed blister 65 back. That sold for $405. And then the other Han Solo with the alternate image, this was a clear blister 65 back C punched example. That sold for $525. And again, Han Solo, especially with that alternate image, man, if they're in high grade like this, they can command a big, big number. That's actually a lower number than I would have expected, to be honest with you. Very, very nice price on that one. And then some Power of the Force from this seller before we talk about a few other sellers. This was a General Lando that sold for $306. That was in about 80 or 80 plus grade condition. Very good price there. And this number really surprised me. I don't know why this one went so high, but it did. And this was the Imperial Gunner on a Power of the Force card. And it looks like he's got frosting on his head there. You can see there that the head's got a little faint frosting going on. And it still sold for $960 in an auction, which is a huge number. Huge number. it was a clean example, but you know, again, it had frosting. I don't know if I don't know if bidders just didn't notice that there was frosting on his head or not, but I would think this thing at max gets a 75 plus because of that. But maybe it gets a low 80, but it's got some edge wear at the top of the card there, so too, and it was punched. So I don't know why it went so high. That number seems really, really high to me, but that's what it sold for. And then some other cards from some other sellers. This was the last solid dome R2-D2 before they switched over to the sensor scope on the 45 back. This is the 41 back, and it was a clear blister. I think you can make an argument there at the bottom of the blister. It looks like it might be starting to yellow just slightly. That sold for $450 in a buy it now. Pretty good deal there. And here's that other Darth Vader. Now this one did have a heavy, moderate to heavy yellowing to the blister, which doesn't happen much on ESBs, but this one also had some sticker residue in the upper right-hand corner. But it's on a 48 back B. It's got the sticker on the back for the Admiral Akbar mail-away, and the card looked to be in pretty clean condition, and it sold for $290 in a buy it now. That number seems low to me, even with the yellowing to the blister. Darth Vader's, man, on ESB card bags, and this one looks like it might have some frosting too on the cape. Something weird going on there, but certainly yellowing to the blister on that. But $289.95 feels like a really good deal for that particular character card back combination. And then two more before we wrap things up. Brian's Toys had an AFA 80 Paplu punched example, and that one sold for $273. That number feels about right. You know, ungraded, these can go for like 200-ish, so $273 is a pretty fair deal. And then finally, this number was huge, although we have seen a few that have been like this. The A-Wing palette on a very clean-looking Power of the Force card, unpunched, no price sticker. That one sold down in Australia for $609 US dollars, 930 Australian dollars, and that's a big number. But we've seen a lot of A-Wings mint on card lately that have hit that number, so that's not too surprising, I guess. But some of these Power of the Force, like the Imperial Gunner in this one, they felt a little higher than I would have expected. So anyway, just some recent sales. I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what's selling out there, both in buy it nows as well as in auctions. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to leave me a like if you did, and I'll be back soon.